So today we're going to talk about when Hasbro is going to release a new character from the comic books in Marvel Legends form. I've seen people ask this question here and there, and if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that I like to do everything based on as much data as possible. And so with that in mind, I've compiled another set of data and we'll go through it and extrapolate what we can about when Hasbro will make a release. So let's go and get right into it. I went through a couple of different Marvel Legends websites that track releases, and I took all that data from them and I put it into a spreadsheet. I based it on any characters that are relatively new, made within the last 5 years, 10 years or so. Basically just characters that aren't the classic, you know, the Spider-Man, the Captain America, right? So the obviously new characters or new versions of characters, like for example, at the top of my list is going to be the Herald Thor, or Cosmic Thor as some will call him. From there, I used various Marvel comic Wikipedia pages to look up first appearances for these characters. Finally, I used a very basic formula to subtract the first comic book appearance with the Marvel Legends release year. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at the data that I've created. So we can see we have 36 releases. That's give or take, because you can see number 33 is the Marvel Now Mutants. And so that's just grouped together because that was like Wolverine and Cyclops and a handful of others. But if you look at it, starting from the oldest one on this list in particular, is Superior Spider-Man. And we can see that the release was in 2014, but his first appearance was in 2013. So that was just a year between appearance and release. And then we look at Agent Venom, we got 3 years, so on and so forth. One of the things I want to point out about this list is that the majority of these figures are actually new sculpts. So other ones are going to be a retool, which is when it's mostly the same figure, but then you have a few parts that are changed, like the head or a chest part. As an example, God Doom looks just like Dr. Doom release, except his chest is very different. Otherwise, the rest of the figure is pretty much exactly the same. You can see that the vast majority of these we're seeing are 1, 2, and 3 years. And so there are a couple of outliers though. And so let's look at those. And so the first one we have is Iron Fist in the white costume. So you can see that it was 5 years from first release to Legends release. And I think that's likely just because if you look at my previous video where I talk about the price increases of Marvel Legends, you can see that around the 2012 to 2013 timeframe is when Hasbro really started cranking out the figures. The other exception would be Ironheart. And so with Ironheart, you can see that from first appearance to release, we have a 5-year gap. And that one is marked in particular because that mold of the figure is a totally brand new mold. There are no other characters that are like that in Marvel Legends form. The rest of the ones that are kind of outliers aren't really outliers, and here's why. So you can see that we have the God Doom, and it was 6 years from first appearance to release. However, God Doom is actually just a retool of the Dr. Doom release in 2020. So if you kind of look at it in the sense of 2020 to 2021 when he was released, it was just a year apart. So realistically, it was Hasbro wanted to put out their original Dr. Doom first, and then they were able to just put out a retool not too long after that. And that's the same with a few of the others. So the AI Stark, that one released in 2021, but the original 80th anniversary Iron Man came out in 2019. So that's only 2 years later. That's an easy repaint. And then we have Civil Warrior. That one is a 7-year difference between comic first appearance and then Marvel Legends release. But we can see that the original figure that it's based off of, which was the Hydra Supreme, came out in 2019. So that is also only a 2-year difference from original release and then the repaint. So, and then the Hydra Supreme himself, that one was only a 3-year difference from first appearance to Legends release. With those being outliers, I really look more at the rest of the numbers and figures. because the vast majority of these are using brand new sculpts. So we're not seeing any other figures that are using anything off of, as an example, Cosmic Ghost Rider or the Venomized Cap. You know, it's not just that Hasbro is just gonna crank out another figure by just repainting what they already have. Yeah, they've done that a little bit here and there with these particular characters, but by and large, these are all new sculpts. And why does that matter? That matters because, you know, creating a new sculpt means that actual time and effort to create a new sculpt, the engineering and the tooling that goes into creating these figures. And if these figures aren't able to be easily repainted into another character, then there's a potential loss, because, you know, they're creating that mold, but it can't be used again. So maybe they found some other way to do these molds where it's more cost effective, which is why they're able to release all these different kinds of characters. But I can't say for sure. One thing I would be curious about is if there's actually any correlation between comic book readers and or collectors, as well as action figure collectors, because, you know, with a lot of these characters, these are ones that we're not necessarily seeing in cartoons or in movies or in any other medium outside of the comic book itself. And I don't think there's a lot of little kids reading comic books that are also collecting action figures. My question would be, is there really a demand for some of these characters? I didn't think Poison would be very high in demand, but they created the figure, right? And that came, you know, from the comic book and hasn't really shown up anywhere else. So who else would pick up that figure outside of a person that is either just trying to collect everything, or a person that is actually familiar with and desiring to have that character in hand? So just a question. If you have your own thoughts on that, please let me know in the comments below. I'd really like to know if there's any kind of correlation between people that collect the comic books and people that collect action figures. So what does all this really mean? Let's sort the years from first appearance to release. And we can see that our median number, which is the number right in the middle of all of your numbers, is 2. So if we use that as a number, then we can say that it's about 2 years from a character's first appearance to a Marvel Legends release. If on the other hand, we want to use an average, then we're still looking at about 2.5 years from character first appearance to Marvel Legends release. So I'd say that's a pretty safe bet that if there's a new character in the comic books, that we will likely see them in Marvel Legends form in about 2 to 3 years. If we don't see them by about the 3rd year, then odds of a release in Marvel Legends form drops dramatically. One character in particular I would have really liked to have seen in Marvel Legends form is Sleeper, one of the newer symbiotes from the Venom cast of characters. That character came out 4 years ago now, so odds of us getting a Sleeper Marvel Legends figure, I think, has gone down by quite a bit. That's not to say that it's impossible, because again, we have a few outliers that did get released, but the odds are very, very low at this point. If Sleeper becomes a character that shows up in a movie or in one of the cartoons, then maybe we'll see a release. But I just don't see it happening based on what we already know. So now that you know when Hasbro is going to release a new figure on a new character, you might also be interested in knowing which exclusive Marvel Legends to get for cheap right now before it's too late. If you want to see that, check out the video right here.